Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Elizabeth Browning, and I want to welcome you to this season's finale of Inspiring Life with Elizabeth. After this episode, we're going to take a hiatus for the summer. And so for my final episode, I wanted to touch on a topic that is very near and dear to my heart with someone that I have the utmost respect for. And so let me introduce you to tonight's special guest, Tracy Powell-Rudy. Tracy Powell-Rudy grew up in Westchester County, New York, graduated summa cum laude from Manhattanville College, and received her master's in telecommunications management from NYU Polytechnic University. Early in her career, Tracy managed the Northeast IT organization for MCI Telecommunications and spent 6 years in retained executive search in several premier global search firms focused at vice president through CEO levels. While raising her brilliant children and most recently celebrating the college graduation of her autistic daughter, Tracy has served as the Vice President of Corporate Engagement at Integrate, leveraging her experience and deep understanding of autism. She is building flourishing relationships between senior leaders at key Fortune 500 corporations and the 35% of autistic individuals who attend college and then experience an 85% unemployment rate upon graduation. Tracy's mission is to turn those numbers on its head, and she's helping organizations successfully identify, recruit, and retain professionals on the autistic spectrum. Tracy is also the executive producer of the short film Lucy in the Sky, featuring Whoopi Goldberg, with other exciting projects in the works. And Tracy is here tonight to share her inspiring journey and to educate us all about the joys, challenges, and rich new opportunities that exist for autistic young professionals. Let's give a warm welcome to Tracy Powell-Rudy.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Warm welcome. Welcome. I am so happy you're here. Oh my goodness. I look at your life so far and it makes my head spin, really. It's the things that you've done. And I'm really excited for you to share what it is you do now. But I think to really do service to what you're creating, I'd love for you to start a little bit at the beginning in terms of your early career and your journey and how you've come to do what it is you're doing today.
Thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to share about my passion. As you know, I started my career in telecommunications. Actually, little known fact, I first started with the World Wrestling Federation.
I did not know that.
No, you didn't. But I had decided fairly early on that was not going to be my career path, and got the opportunity to start in telemarketing in MCI Telecommunications, and did sales for a short period of time, and did not want my income to be determined by someone else's decision on whether or not to buy a product or service. So I moved inside the organization and started as a staff assistant in internal tel, ultimately managing the organization for about the first 7 years of my career. It was a wonderful experience because it was a bit of being what the shoemaker's kids in terms of they did not know where to put the IT organization within an IT company. So I worked for the director of operations, the director of procurement and facilities, the director of MIS, director of engineering, all throughout my career, which gave me a wonderful opportunity to understand the unique and different perspectives of all these different executives within a corporation.
Wow.
Loved what I was doing there as well. Had the great good fortune to be there for 20 years. So very, very
So you got a lot of experience from a lot of different places. And then after that, you went on to do the search,
Yep. My daughter was diagnosed with autism when she was 11 while I was at MCI. And I felt at that point that I needed to kind of refocus, figure out how I could best support her. MCI was going through a number of different issues, including bankruptcy with WorldCom. So I decided that that would be the time to leave and refocus my energies on my daughter's health and well-being. I did that for about 6 months and realized that I needed to continue to work outside as well as getting her on track. And so then I started working with a retained executive search firm, which gave me the opportunity to handle my schedule, have a little bit more control over my life, and also exposed me to a number of different people in a number of different positions in a number of different companies. I learned about networking, about conducting and sourcing recruiting candidates, and I learned about resume writing and how to present oneself in that forum. And then
what I find fascinating about this, and I've heard this so many times to be the case, is there's got to be a point in which you're saying, I'm doing so many different things, and what is it that I'm supposed to be doing? And yet looking back, every single thing you did became integral and really necessary for what you're doing now.
And I remember at that time feeling a little bit discouraged. I knew that there was something more I was supposed to be doing and didn't understand what it was or how I was going to tie in all the things that I had been doing, because there was no clear path for that. And then I read an article about a program that Integrate was starting at the time was PwC. And so because I've been using LinkedIn and networking, I had no hesitation to reach out to the president and founder of the organization. And I said, I want to help. How can I help? And as she tells the story, be careful what you wish for, because now I've been here 10 years and fully dedicated to our mission as well. But what I did do is any conversation I had while I was working in the retained executive search field, while I was volunteering for Integrate, because I didn't start as an employee, any conversation I had with the permission of the team that I was working for, I would end the call with, are you familiar with autism? Do you know anything?
Wow.
Tell you about this organization? And I would engage in that conversation. And when I first started asking that question, I will tell you that maybe 1 out of every 6 conversations, someone said, yes, I'm familiar with autism. I have a relative, a friend, somehow I have knowledge about this. By the end of that career, I would say about 50% of those conversations were with someone who said, oh, I have a personal connection. And now it's, I'd say it's 9 out of 10 conversations that I have.
Wow.
I'm fully committed to what we're doing here at Integrate.
So let's talk for a minute. There's a reason we know each other. We met many years ago at our Montessori school. Yes, that was the first time we met. We have it because both of our children are autistic, and we've gone on a real journey together. And I know that there will be moms listening to this show and people who are going in one direction and never expect that autism is going to be a part of their life. And then suddenly the whole world changes. So can we touch just a little bit on you as a mom, the things that you have learned, that if there's something you'd love to share with others, and then we'll move to the big picture of how you're changing the world literally for everyone. But I would love to hear a little bit about your journey and our journey.
I still remember the first time we met. It was in the hallway at Montessori. I'm trying to think if our kids had already connected and had a conversation where they had disclosed to each other at that point. So I was completely scoping you out. And I remember going, Who's that gorgeous woman standing over in the corner there? But yeah, so, you know, my daughter Samantha was diagnosed when she was 11 and she had been in public school. Honestly, I'm the one who diagnosed her. I had read an article about by Shana Nichols, who has written a book on girls on the spectrum, and Tony Atwood, who was very well known in the Asperger syndrome space. And the article, as I was reading it, I kept going, you know, I was checking off each line, and I ran downstairs, I printed it off, showed it to my husband, and I said, Sam is autistic. Sam's got Asperger syndrome, you know, because that was the terminology that was used then. And had to put my research hat on, which is something I love to do, and find a practitioner who was really informed on diagnosing autism in females, because it can present very differently than in males. And I remember walking in to start that process, and the doctor, the neuropsychologist, said to me after a few minutes of talking to the two of us, he's like, listen, she's not on the spectrum, but there is something here and we'll figure it out. And he sends me back out into the waiting room. 30 minutes later, he came out and he said to me, mothers always know. So
it is so true. Mothers always know on every level. And sometimes mothers don't trust what they know because somebody tells us something else. So
I think that's like the first lesson is trust your intuition. You know, the other thing I learned when raising a daughter on the spectrum also was that the neurotransmitters that operate in your brain, serotonin, dopamine, all those things are actually produced in your gut. So there's a reason why when you say my gut says,
oh wow,
it is there is a connection there. So you know, that's you know, number one. Number two, also trusting my intuition. I must have looked at 20, 30 schools trying to find a place where I thought my daughter would fit in and thrive. And which was heart-wrenching because I wasn't sure I was going to find it. I mean, I traveled out of state. I literally got on a plane and went to other parts of the country, said, okay, we'll move if we need to. And then I remember walking into Montessori and just, I knew it was right. So another example of, you know, intuition.
And I think autism is so tricky because it's so vast and individuals manifest in such different ways. And, you know, we're just now growing into even understanding it. And now we're making all these amazing new discoveries. You were talking to me the other day about people say, well, where are they on the spectrum? And I love something Elijah said to me years ago. Someday I am going to write a book called Lessons from Elijah because he has taught me so much. But he said, Mom, he said, everyone's on the spectrum and the spectrum is a big circle. And I just went, it's not like high, low, there's this life circle and we are in different places. And if we could start to understand that, but I'd love for you to talk about something you shared with me the other day in terms of high functioning, low functioning until.
I love Elijah's imagery for that. I love the idea of it's a circle because we always talk about that it's a spectrum.
Like a line.
Yeah, but I think the circle is a much more, it's a holistic perspective. The other thing that we have in this field is if you've met one person on a spectrum, you've met one person on the spectrum.
Exactly.
Well, so there's a couple of things that have kind of changed over the course of the last few years relative to language. We don't use high functioning and low functioning any longer, primarily because high functioning was associated with somebody who was verbal and lower functioning was associated with somebody who was nonverbal. And of course, what everyone has seen is now that the technology is in place that allows somebody to keyboard and communicate if they're nonverbal, that individuals who are lower functioning are actually brilliant, competent, smart individuals and just needed a voice, and technology provides them with that. So that's one thing. You know, we've also talked about Asperger syndrome versus autistic versus on the spectrum, and that continues to change. The DSM, boy, how many years ago now? Probably we're talking 4 or 5 years ago. They removed Asperger syndrome as a diagnosis code. So while it's still part of the vernacular in some way, it's really kind of moving out. And so we tend to just refer to individual who's being diagnosed as autistic. There's also the differences between identity first and person first language. Some individuals on the spectrum wish to be referred to as an autistic person, and some individuals will say, I'm a person with autism. There seems to be a trend towards the autistic person. I'm an autistic person. But again, as many people, as the diversity exists within those who are diagnosed, there are completely different points of view around what people prefer. So when we work with organizations, companies who are looking at hiring autistic individuals, we say, well, by virtue of the fact that we're presenting this talent to you, they're disclosed. So you know that they are either autistic or on the spectrum, whatever word they prefer, and you can ask them what their preference is for describing them. And some of our individuals will disclose and disclose broadly, and some won't disclose, don't want to disclose at all, or maybe just to their manager or to their person who supports them in HR. But yeah, so that continues to change as well.
And I think, I mean, I know for me, because you find one person on the spectrum, you've met one person on the spectrum, you find one mother of a person on the spectrum, and you've met one mother of a person on the spectrum. And I know one of my huge breakthroughs came when Elijah was just a baby. I mean, he was maybe 3 or 4. And I was talking to a therapist, and you have those moments where a lightning bolt of truth comes into your heart and you go, oh my God, somebody just spoke truth. And I was crying to this therapist. I was so sad because why doesn't my kid behave like all the other kids? And why are all the other kids over playing in the gym and he's talking to himself in the corner? And she said, what if he's a genius? And what if he was brought into your life because he needs someone who will hold a space big enough for him to actualize all that he's meant to be? And it was just like, it was like, oh my God. And then as time went by, I got to discover that he was talking to himself in the corner because he was writing scripts and he was watching movies in his head and he was synthesizing things. And at one point, we literally had a code as he got older, and I'd say, Elijah, pause it. You have to pause the video in your head for a minute because I got to talk to you about something. And he'd go, okay. But he said, honestly, the stuff that's going on around me a lot of times is nowhere near as interesting as what I'm creating. And so there's so much that we don't understand about the difference in thinking and processing. And as mothers, we're like, what's the right thing to do? Do I label? Do I not label? So I love that you're sharing this, and the rules keep changing too.
Very, very true. And you reminded me of a story when I forget what Sam had done, but it was something that I was not pleased about. And I had said to her, this is not okay. And I must have invoked God's name. And in this situation, God would not be okay with this or whatever. So it must have been something serious, but I don't remember what it was. And the next day I walked out into the garage and she had one of those, they're not called Etch-a-Sketches. That's from when we were kids. They're Magnadoodle boards.
Right.
She had on the Magnadoodle board, and I kid you not, she was maybe 8 years old. She wrote, "Is God's will moms?" Question. I looked at that, I'm like, I'm in so much trouble, right?
Until you're 21, the answer is yes. And then
right. And this is the same child who said to me, I had reached out to her second grade teacher. I was concerned. Didn't know what was going on, but just had a sense that I would be concerned. And she said, no, everything's fine. She gets there and she gets there in her own time. And then third grade, switch that. The teacher's now calling me because she's concerned because Sam is not playing with all the friends on the playground. Instead, Sam is playing with her imaginary friends off on the side, and she's talking through whatever. what she's doing actually is replaying what she's learned in class and teaching those things to her imaginary friends, which is reinforcing what she's learned, right? And she comes home and I said, you know, the teacher called up and she said she's a little concerned because you're not doing this. And she goes, Mom, she goes, my friends all know who I am and they have a problem with it. She goes, it's the teacher who has a problem with it.
Wow.
Truer words,
Wow.
not stated. But, you know, related to that is our children don't come with a reference guide or with a manual, a service manual. And it would be really helpful. And I think that's changing a bit. There's more early intervention and support, but it's actually, to some degree, it's the parents who need to be taught, right?
I so agree. Please teach us.
Well, there's one of the things that was really impactful for us was working with the behavioral therapist, which I know there's some people have, that's controversial for some. But this person didn't work with my daughter. This person worked with me and my husband to teach us how to parent a child like our daughter, which basically meant that we didn't get to punish her, which had worked really well for my first child and not at all for my second. And he talked about creating a token economy for her.
What?
The token economy basically is rewarding the behavior that you want to see, to incentivize that behavior, which, by the way, is what you do when you're running a sales organization and you're trying to get people, right, reward them by closing the deal. So we had to redo how we managed, how our upbringing of our daughter, how we raised our daughter, which was every single behavior we were looking for: brushing your teeth, cleaning your dishes, whatever that was, we provided rewards for it. It was like we had a behavioral chart and we had stars. And by the way, we still do it. You know, there's certain things that we're trying to help her to learn how to do better, to be more independent in certain things. That's what we'll focus on. And we will, relative to her allowance, we'll say, okay, you'll get more for doing this behavior if that's the behavior that we need to see. What's amazing is within 24 hours of rewarding it, and it's true for all of us, it becomes a habit. So she habituates it, then she does it. It's how she learned how to drive, you know, things that were scary and frightening. We just created this token economy to incentivize. And we also learned, I think it's equally important, not to inadvertently reinforce maladaptive behavior. And so if somebody's if somebody's doing something that is ultimately not going to serve them, you don't want to let them continue to do it. Texting me during a business day constantly and having me respond right away is reinforcing that kind of a maladaptive behavior. And I know I shared this with you before. I learned this when my son was a baby. Why I didn't apply it to my daughter, I don't know. But the daycare center director had said to me, because every time I would start to leave and walk out the door, my son would start to cry and I would stop and I would go back in. And so the Anderson was her name. She pulled me aside and she said, you need to understand that when you do that, you are telling your son he's not safe to be left here alone.
Mm.
So if that's not the message you want him to have, then you need to stop doing that. And so what I would do was then say, I would preview, Mom is going to leave in 3 minutes. Okay, I'm going to leave in 1 minute. Which, by the way, is something what we talk about working in the autism space is really important as a manager to do with your staff. And so I would tell him I was leaving and then I would go. And what the staff told me was, if you're still worried after you've left, you know, we all have cell phones, call and we will reassure you that your son is fine. And after I did that like once or twice, he didn't cry anymore because he knew he was okay. So, you know, these are things that, you know, were valuable lessons that I wish somebody had written the book and said, here, this is what
well, Tracy, that may be your next book. It's like 101 for moms. I mean, along those lines, also really honoring the fact, at least, and I'll speak for my own son, but I'm pretty sure this is sort of a common denominator. everything is taken very literal. If you say something, that's what you mean, and that's true. And Elijah has one of the kindest hearts. He had a teacher once that said, there is no ounce of malice in that child. He believes in what's true. And so you can't be shaded or cool or hip or allude to something because it doesn't make sense. And in truth, you start to look at the things that we do that we call, the way we all behave. And a lot of it is really not kind or inappropriate or snarky or cynical. And I know I told you this story, but I really learned this lesson. He was maybe 5, and we went to the Bronx Zoo, and it was the Christmas and lights, and they had minstrels, and they had this giant fairy princess on stilts, and she was going around and she was touching all the kids on the head with a wand going, may all your dreams come true. And all the kids were like, oh, and I said, Elijah, go over and stand next to her. I want to take your picture. And he's like, And I was like, just go stand next to her. So he goes, and he's like standing next to her, and I'm about to take the picture, and she reaches over and says, may all your dreams come true. And she touches his head, and he goes ballistic, and he's screaming, get it off, get it off. Everything stops. Everyone's looking. I could not console him. We had to pick him up, carry him to the car. I'm crying. He's crying. 2 weeks later, we're in the car driving, and I said, Elijah, what happened at the zoo? And he went, Mom, I don't want all my dreams to come true. And I just went, oh my God, who would want every dream you've ever had, nightmares included, to all? So he was like, I trust this situation, and get that creature away from me because I don't want it. But from the outside, it looked like a little boy who was having a hysterical meltdown for no good reason. And that's where you start to go to listen to our children, to honor our children, to hear the magic that's going on in their head. So we could tell stories all night, but I really want you to get to integrate, because you are changing our world as we speak. My son is one of the very blessed, lucky recipients to have gone through this program. And before we talk about it, I think you have a video that you're going to play. It's just like a 2-minute video to give people sort of an overview.
They struggle in the social arena.
But they're not good at interacting with people.
Think of people who are not very social.
Well-versed in about 6 languages.
I don't really think of them as goal-oriented or as achievers, really.
I worked my way from an intern in special projects and development at Juilliard all the way up to director of development at Grass.
Right now, I do a lot of research on different food and wine companies in New York, and I do a lot of the admin work.
I work at Lewis Berger at their corporate headquarters in human resources.
My name is Matt. I work in the technology division. I'm a financial analyst.
Whatever job, whatever kind of work that I do, is that I'm very passionate, extremely hardworking.
I've been working for Barclays for over 5 years now. I work in HR, specifically in a diversity inclusion team.
So many people that we work with don't seem to have a purpose. But if you have a position somewhere, all these types of issues start to follow it.
That's really where A-Step comes in. They do a wonderful job of introducing people with autism.
We're competing for the best talent in the world, and the best talent in the world comes from everywhere.
Take each individual on merit. Does the individual that you're about to hire or looking to hire bring the requisite skill set?
Whether it's technical skills, problem-solving skills, hardworking, or loyalty, you're going to get a lot out of these employees that are neurodiverse.
80% of our company has Asperger's or a similar autism spectrum profile. Our team members apply themselves with the same level of seriousness every day, every project, every task.
It's important to make it a success from the beginning, and certainly work with A-Step.
I'm Paulette, and I'm affected by autism.
I am affected by autism.
I experience having autism.
I am affected by autism.
I'm affected by autism. I'm affected by autism.
So A-Step has since evolved into Integrate, which is the company that is now doing this. Can tell us what you guys are doing, and also there you have some pretty staggering statistics. Why does this matter to all of us?
Yeah. So the data now for the incidence rate, according to the CDC, is 1 in 54 individuals are being, and that's 8-year-olds for diagnosis being on the spectrum now. Journal of Pediatrics actually says that number is more like 1 in 40.
That's an amazing number, because people think, oh, well, this doesn't involve me. But the truth is, our world is evolving, and these brilliant minds are coming in at a greater frequency and bringing all these gifts, and we need to learn how to adapt. So
yeah, so it's 1 million individuals who are transitioning to adulthood who will be autistic over the next decade. And as you pointed out, about 35% of those individuals who are diagnosed go on to post-secondary education, and they're going to find institutions of higher learning across the country. Many of them are going on to get their master's degrees. We've had law degrees, medical degrees, PhDs that we have come through some of our programs as well. So, our mission is to, well, let me finish that. So 35% of those individuals are graduating. The unemployment rate for that population is somewhere between 75 and 85%. And that's unemployed or underemployed. So you're taking somebody who's got a master's degree and you're having them work as a checkout cashier at a grocery store. So that's the statistic right now. And when we present that to companies, they often ask us to, what our feelings are for why that is. And there's a couple different things at play here. One of which is that, as you talked about, are autistic individuals, and I'm generalizing here, so I understand, of course, make sure I'm aware that I'm doing that. But autistic individuals tend to be more concrete thinkers, black and white thinkers, literal thinkers, and very, very honest and have a high moral compass. So when they read a job description that lists 10 different requirements and they only have 5 or 6 or 7, not inclined to apply. Well, I don't have everything you're looking for, so why would you want to hire me? Not understanding that it's understood that you're not going to have all of the requirements listed. Similarly, some of those job descriptions say things like strong interpersonal skills, great communication skills. For some of our autistic individuals, that's not their strength. So again, they won't apply. And then if you look at our recruiting processes, they're really, really geared towards social skills. So for some of our candidates, that puts them in a kind of an unlevel playing field where they're going to be getting screened out. So what Integrate does is we create autism-friendly corporations, basically.
Yay, thank you, thank you, thank you. And what was exciting to me when I learned about this, the corporations are actually paying to learn this. This is like, and there's a reason they're paying to learn this, because there's another statistic in terms of the kind of employees they'll get if they learn.
You look at the data from JP Chase, SAP, Microsoft, they will show you that they see a 90% retention rate in their autistic employees. And these are some of the employers who have the largest cohorts of autistic individuals in their employ now. You see up to, I think this is JP Chase's data, up to an increase of 140% increase in productivity as a result of hiring neurodivergent talent, right? They bring this different perspective. Cognitive diversity is a good thing. Creativity is a good thing. You also see increase in employee engagement. And for every percentage increase, you see an increase in employee engagement, you see an uptick, I think, in revenue. I think it's 50 million.
Oh, wow.
Talking about a significant benefit to an organization when they are focused on and competent in attracting and retaining autistic talent. And that's what Integrate does. We help companies identify, recruit, retain, onboard autistic college graduates primarily. And our focus there is for two reasons. One, that's where our expertise is. We are all parents of individuals that work in the organization that have raised kids who've gone on to college. So that's what we know. And when you look at the data, the unemployment rate across the spectrum is 55%, which is not an acceptable number in and of itself, but it's certainly a smaller number than 75 to 85%, particularly for college graduates whose parents have paid college tuition, who want their children to be able to be successful and pay taxes, as well as to, rather than be SSI recipients.
Well, and your daughter and my son graduated from college with honors. It's not like they're barely eking by. It's like they are excelling. And so, but there are misconceptions that I think the population as a whole has, but also employers. Can you address what some of the misconceptions are?
Well, I think that a lot of people still hold the Dustin Hoffman Rain Man model of autism, which is, I think, unfortunate. And the second is that one of the things that we're trying to fight against in terms of stereotyping is that all autistic individuals are computer science folks, and that the only job that you can put somebody in is software quality assurance and testing, or programming and coding, and that's just not the case. I'll say about 25% of autistic individuals probably are gifted in that area. Another 20% are geared towards financing, forensic accountants, that kind of thing, and gifted with numbers. And then the rest of the group is diverse as your own high school graduating class. And we hold your son out as an example of this. We have budding screenwriters and playwrights and musicians and comedians. I have an individual who I introduced to an SVP over at Disney and at the Disney Channel, who was a songwriter and a producer. One of his songs is going to be featured in the upcoming Zombie 3 soundtrack. So, these are individuals who, given the right opportunity, having a company that is autism friendly, and who asks interview questions that won't trip somebody up, and goes through our training, which is so critical as well. You're creating this great opportunity for these individuals. And going back to the story that you were telling before, Elizabeth, about may all your dreams come true. Give you a perfect example. We had an executive who did not go through our training, who just came to address a group of individuals. Elijah has experience through our Employer Connect program. And he came in, and with the best of intentions, he said to the audience, I want this presentation to be highly interactive. Feel free to interrupt me at any time. We all know that's not what he meant. He meant raise your hand, wait till I ask for questions. And sure enough, one young man had a question and just blurted it out and interrupted him. And you could see, Patrick was like, oh, dude, you just interrupted me. And then went, wait a minute, I told you to do that. So then he gave the answer, and about 15 seconds into the answer, the same young man said, all right, that's enough, I get it. So, and these
things, which is what most of us would love to be able to blurt out in many situations, but he was given those instructions. That's exactly, it gets very confusing. You just told me to be interactive and jump in at any time, and now I'm not supposed to. So
our training, we focus first on assessment. We take a look at the organization in terms of where they are relative to diversity and inclusion, what their recruiting process looks like, what their job descriptions look like, and we go from there. Then we do our training on general autism awareness and interviewing techniques to be successful. And then we will present them with a slate of candidates that we've now sourced for them that meet the job descriptions and happen to be autistic as well. And then we'll help them once they're on board. And we don't help the individuals because we're recruiting work-ready talents. We help the managers become more effective and strategic thinkers and communicators. It's, we talk about in autism, the challenge that autistic individuals have around something called theory of mind, which is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And what I say now in the training that I conduct is flip that. The challenge is for a neurotypical to put themselves in the shoe of an autistic mind and think literally, concretely, and in a black and white way. And that's where the challenge is. We had a manager who called us up and she said, I approached this young man who's autistic and I asked him, how would he like to work on this project with me? And he said, no. I said very politely to her, I said, so who's the person who has an issue here? The person who asked a question that wasn't really a question, or the person who answered it honestly and said no? And by the way, he didn't say no because he didn't want to help her. He said no because he's already working on another project for another manager. This was a heavily matrixed managed organization. So we give managers permission to go back and be direct, but be clear and be thoughtful and know how to preview situations, which we all benefit from. And what our companies will tell you is that their managers become better managers by virtue of the fact that they now have managed autistic talent, right?
And I think also there's a lot to learn because someone's face isn't animated, because they're not looking you in the eye or laughing at your jokes. That doesn't mean that there isn't a profound thing that's going on in terms of their understanding, their sensitivity. And I think that we get nervous if someone isn't behaving the way we're used to people behaving. So can you address that? Because I know that there are genius people out there with gifts that are not able to actually make eye contact with you. I know one of them personally who blows me away with his talent, but he can't look at you.
So there's a term in marketing, an acronym called FUD. It's creating fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So when you're trying to market your product against your competitor's product, if you can create FUD about the competitor's product, people are less likely to buy it, more likely to buy yours. And I talk about that relative to when you're interviewing somebody who's autistic, or when you first start that process. And so, you know, one of our training focuses on the hidden curriculum and executive function challenges, as well as things like stimming, self-soothing behaviors.
Give an example for people who don't know what.
So for
rocking,
fidgeting, getting up and walking around, it's a release of the nervous energy. And some individuals actually stim when they're happy and not anxious, but some are when they're anxious, right? So that's all things that we cover in the training as well. But what we want to do is create an opportunity. We want to overcome objections before they get articulated. So when you're interviewing, the data will show you, and I know this for certain, having done recruiting for half a dozen years, you actually make the decision whether you're going to move that person forward in the hiring process within the first 60 seconds of meeting them.
Wow.
Of your conversation is truthfully you just trying to corroborate your initial hypothesis of up or down, right? Yes or no. So what you want to do is you want to overcome objections before they get articulated, before they get stated, consciously or subconsciously. And so by doing our training and educating someone on the fact that somebody might not make eye contact, and that's fine. Actually, there's new data now that shows that looking someone in the eye when you're autistic is actually painful. I mean,
I heard that the nervous system, it's so intense because they're so heightened in their sensitivity.
And what we talk about, you know, I have this chart where I put up the spectrum of crayon colors, the Crayola box of crayons, and I do one with all the colors where you can see it, and one if you've got red-green blindness. And I'm like going, okay, so you wouldn't go to somebody who's colorblind and say, which one's red, which one's green? And I'm not willing to go any further with you because you can't do this, right? Unless, of course, the job requires color differentiation. So what we do is we create an environment that's more supportive, where somebody sitting across from an autistic individual says, oh, I can see you're not looking in the eye, or you might look at me with a more intense stare. And I know you told me, or Integrate trained me and said, this is how you might present. So this is what I expected. right? So it's just kind of, it's going back to previewing, which is good for the manager, it's good for the individual. This is what you can expect. Or our scenario-based training, where we talk about situations that come up and how to manage them successfully, what to do when this happens. Or as you said, you know, if you're aware that somebody's getting very fidgety or they're stimming a lot, you know, as a manager, because you have a relationship with them or because we've presented that data, that person's really anxious. So maybe now what you want to do is ask them or say, I see that you are feeling some anxiety about this conversation that we're having. Why don't we take a break? Or why don't you tell me how I can support you in this moment? What compensatory strategy can you deploy or can I deploy to make this an easier thing for you?
And what I love about that is that the things that might be the very thing that would never allow us to get to know what someone's able to do, it just moves it to the side. And then you start to see that you have potentially an extraordinary person who can do exactly what you want them to do. And it doesn't matter if they need to stand up and walk, or if they need to like listen but not stare at you, if you're going to get these incredible results. And there are a lot of famous people who have, would you like to just talk a little bit about some of the people who have autism?
You know, Elon Musk just disclosed. So when you think about it from that perspective, there are certain things that he's created, products, you know, the Tesla, et cetera. You know, that's because he's autistic. You know, he thinks out of the box. He thinks creatively. Anthony Hopkins has disclosed. I think we all know Dan Aykroyd as well. So you're talking about, you know, people who think differently, but think greatly.
And they talked about Einstein, like they're like going back and going, oh,
obviously, yes.
Yeah.
And probably Freud. There are probably a number of other famous folks. And, you know, and I want to be mindful of not everyone who's autistic is a genius.
Of course.
You know, it's, I guess it's a process, it's a journey. I certainly knew my daughter was great. I never in a million years would have predicted she would graduate summa cum laude. I would have wagered a lot of money and never would I, you know, and it's not because I didn't have faith in her. I saw where she was struggling. But yep, she figured it out.
I think that's one of the gifts and the challenges for moms and for family members, to not try to decide for them how far they can go or what they're actually able to do. Because I know in my world, my son surprises me daily. He wrote a musical and he doesn't know how to write music or play any instrument. And it's some of the most beautiful music and I said, where did this come from? He goes, it just comes into my head, and then he sings it into a tape recorder. So we don't know what is going on or what they know or what they're capable of doing. And I think we get into trouble when we work out of our own fear, as opposed to sort of opening to a bright faith and saying, what's out there that we don't know what we don't know. Just like the people who had nonverbal children who are suddenly communicating. And like you said, it's not everyone, we know that, but it's not everyone on the face of the earth that's anything, right? But to treat this as, I love that we called this show the opportunity for us to change, the opportunity for employers to see who's out there in the workforce that may be the very person they're looking for, the opportunity for, you know, young autistic professionals to go, wait, there are going to be open doors. I think it's so exciting to me. It's profoundly exciting. And I could talk about it forever, but I'm looking at the clock. So there is a call to action on every end. And let me share my screen. Tracy, I will let you share all the wonderful possibilities.
You know, if you're a parent watching this and you have a child and at some point they're going to be graduating from college and what next, we would love to have their resume in our database. We are actively recruiting for a number of positions right now, and we are so grateful that we are continuing to have more and more companies who want to go down this path, who are looking for talent. And so we'd love to have those resumes in our database. We also are starting to recruit for our Employer Connect cohort, which we didn't have a chance to talk about here, but Elijah has experienced, and there's more information on our website as well, which is the integratedadvisors.org, referenced in the email there as well. So that's one aspect of it. The other is obviously you can donate. We are sourced, we are a fee for service, but we also, some of our programs are funded through donations as well. And then last but not least, for anybody who is listening, who is works for an employer, we are always eager to engage in conversation with employers who are thinking about going down this path and want to explore how they go about doing it intelligently, thoughtfully, and successfully. And so I am always happy to talk to anybody who wants to facilitate an introduction into their organization to start an autism hiring program. Some companies now refer to as neurodivergent hiring program, but eager to work with companies who want to do that with us as well. So appreciate that.
So on a personal level, thank you, Tracy, for all that you're doing. Elijah's journey with Integrate has been truly extraordinary and continues to unfold in the most beautiful ways. And he's created relationships with people in the entertainment industry that I've been in the entertainment industry for 30 years and my head is spinning, you know, and it's because they have been trained to see what's possible and to push the labels to the side and are inviting him to submit projects and are offering to mentor him big names in Hollywood that I won't mention. And it's because you matched someone's talent with people who are looking for that kind of talent, and you allowed them just to speak and get to know each other. And I know that that's not an opportunity for everyone or the outcome. It's not like, oh, this is what will happen. But the fact that it's possible, and that we have these beautiful beings in our lives that continue to teach us, and thank you for helping us grow and learn and open our eyes. So before we go, are there any last words of wisdom or anything that you would like to leave people with to inspire us or give us a little more hope, or anything you want to share?
You know, there's so many things. The first thing I'm thinking of is, you know, I'm putting you on the spot and reminding you and Elijah that as soon as Elijah gets nominated for his first Emmy, that I am going to the award ceremony on his other arm. You'll be on the left, I'll be on the right. So
that's the deal. He said that earlier. He said, I have my two moms on tonight. This is a little daunting.
So, and you know, I guess it's just this idea that I think for me, what's helpful is to appreciate the thinking differently, to see the value in that, to support our young adults, our young autistic young adults on their journey, and realize that their path is different, and have patience. You know, this goes back to this concept of previewing, right? If somebody had previewed for me, this is what it's going to look like, this is how it's going to play out, you're going to get there 5 or 6 years later than your chronological same age peers for your daughter, but you're going to get there and it's going to be amazing. That would have been a wonderful thing. So I think this idea that, you know, give time. And the other thing is, I'll just say with network, help your kids understand the value of networking. Those relationships, those connections are really helpful. And Elijah knows this, and he'll be the first one to tell you, you don't ask someone for your job. You don't say, I'm looking for a job, can you hire me? Can you ask them for their experience, wisdom, and have them share with you that people want to help. They want to be helpful. And that's why if you ask for a job, it's a problem, because they may not have a job to give you, but people are happy to look at your resume, take a look at the companies you're thinking about working for, looking at your LinkedIn profile, introducing you, making connections, setting you up for mock interviews. These are all things that, you know, help you be successful. And it's all part of what, you know, I do on a regular basis, and why I always ask people, you know, if you know somebody who's thinking about doing this as an employer, let me know, because our mission is obviously to turn that figure upside down as far as the unemployment and underemployment is concerned. But I don't do that by working with individuals. I do that by working with companies and making them autism friendly, so that 10 years from now, I don't need to be in this job anymore. We don't need to exist, because every company is organically able to attract and retain autistic talent.
Oh. And with that, I want to thank you. I want to thank our viewers. I love you all, and I hope everyone has an extraordinary summer, and that it's filled with adventure and with inspiration and with lots of love. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night. Thank you so much, Tracy.